How's it going, everyone? My name is Michael SK, and welcome back to the Fruit of Grisaia. We hit another little milestone, little 50 subscriber milestone, and it's time for another recording session here of the Fruit of Grisaia. I'm going to make this one a long boy because I'm tired of the depressing Sakaki backstory that we've been getting in the past couple or so episodes. I'm ready to move on. I think the people deserve to see Yuuji fuck the ever-loving shit out of Sakaki. That's why everyone's here. I'm pretty sure. This is a hentai game below the surface of a good story. But anyways, I don't really remember what happened last time other than just depressing shit. I think Sakaki went back home. I think that's what happened. So there's all that, and also that her dad is remarrying, or was, or something along those lines. Yeah, that's right. He was deciding to remarry, and that depressed the shit out of Sakaki's mother. So I guess let's read on and see where we're exactly at, because I don't remember. The next day, my father had arranged beforehand for my transfer into an all-girls school some 20 minutes from the mansion by car. It was a very prestigious institution. I'd actually recognized the name. I felt badly out of place, uncomfortable with my new uniform and the beautiful school building. Man, we're gonna get fucking gossiped about even here. We can't escape it. It's in every school. I could hear the whispers from all sides. Entering the classroom, I sat quietly at an open desk, as far from the others as possible. There was an improvement in one regard. The talk about me wasn't particularly cruel or hostile. But essentially, I was treated just like before. My classmates interacted with me in a business-like way when necessary, and otherwise largely pretended I wasn't there. A school full of young ladies from upper-crust families was unsurprisingly uncomfortable in its own way. Having completed my formulaic introduction and the first day of classes, I found myself instinctively heading for the rooftop. After gazing up for a moment, I settled down against a concrete support near the edge of the roof and took out my sketchbook. I began to draw the sky above me, a simple pencil hatching, rendering the clouds and sky in shades of gray. That afternoon, I couldn't stand to look at the world. Anything my eyes settled on repulsed me. That empty sky was the only thing I could bring myself to observe calmly. The driver held open the front door to the house for me. I was delivered to school and back. I didn't even have to open my doors anymore. That extreme courtesy only intensified my discomfort. The household employees greeted me with smiles so soft and mild, it was slightly nauseating. When I answered with a brief nod, they began to bombard me with words in rapid succession, their tone eager and openly professional.
Yumiko-sama, 何か召し上がりますか? いえ、結構です。部屋へ戻ります。では、何かお飲み物をお持ちしましょうか。それも結構です。喉は渇いておりませんから。
それでは、何かありましたらお申し付けください。
はい。
Climbing slowly up the stairs, I heaved a heavy sigh. Would they be putting on that sort of show every single day from now on? Their deference was so transparently artificial that it was painful rather than flattering. Given my current position, it just might be possible to order them to stop acting like that. But I didn't know what repercussions that would have, especially if they were to report it to my father. I ended up deciding it best not to make waves at such an early stage. I'd been able to postpone it for one day with excuses about my fatigue, but the time had come. A glass of wine in one hand, my father turned a radiant smile on me. Inside my head, I spat out the words, "It's the first time." From the moment I sat down in front of that luxurious dinner and my beaming father, I was immediately filled with a desperate longing to flee. I tried a little of the sautéed duck on my plate just to kill a few seconds, but it seemed strangely tasteless and without texture.
転入する際の成績が抜群だったとね。これなら学校間のレベル差はほとんど関係ないとのことだった。
My father, still maintaining the same cheerful tone as the night before, complimented me at great length. All I could manage was to nod and mechanically shovel the food placed in front of me into my mouth. Course after course, I couldn't taste a thing. Had they even put any salt on these? It was like eating hunks of rubber. Carrying things to my mouth solely for the sake of chewing on them didn't make for a pleasant dining experience. Gradually, I began to ignore my plate in favor of frequent sips of water. The tasteless food, Dad's barrage of praise, and myself sitting there passively, just accepting it all. Everything about the scene made me sick. My emotions only grew darker with every passing minute. This was all some bizarre whim of my father's. That, or a meaningless ceremony he was carrying out in pursuit of some hidden objective. What else could it possibly be?
Yumiko, 髪はずっと伸ばしているのか?
I felt my breath catch in my throat. That summer day, the day when the heat had poured down on me like a rain of molten iron. The moment when I had clawed at my chest and hacked at my own hair in a spasm of self-loathing, it all came flooding vividly back. I almost told him that I'd cut it short once, but what would be the point of explaining that to this man? It would only throw this little play into chaos. What on earth did my father mean by asking me a question like that? Why bring up the very thing that had always marked me as worthless?
そうか。とてもよく似合ってるよ。
My father, a smile on his face, spoke those words in a casual tone of voice.
Yumiko.
すみません。
God damn. Rising from my seat, I ran out of the room, both hands pressed tightly across my mouth.
おい、何か体に合わないものがあったんじゃないのか?
I could hear my father snarling at someone behind me, but I didn't have time to be worrying about that. Alright. Acid burned my mouth as I vomited the tasteless food into the toilet bowl, excuse me. None of it had the slightest flavor going down, but coming back up, it was powerfully unpleasant. It seemed a bit unfair somehow. Wasn't my sex the entire reason he'd cast Mom aside? What on earth was my father thinking? How could he say that? Why? He'd never even looked at me before. This had to be some kind of whim. He decided to play house for a while to appease his guilty conscience. Either that, or he needed to do so for some work-related reason. How long would it take before I could find a safe haven? This was no better than living with my grandparents. No. In the countryside, at least I wasn't expected to do anything. There were expectations of me here. That made it even more agonizing. Tasting the acid rising once more from the depths of my throat, I descended into self-pity. I would truly have preferred to shut myself up in a dark shed, to reject the world and do nothing at all for the rest of my life. But so long as I needed food to eat and a bed to sleep in, I had no choice but to play along with my father's momentary kindness. The thought triggered a new wave of nausea. Yeehaw, boys. 1 week passed. People often say that time flies when you're having fun. Perhaps it's true, because those first 7 days seemed to last a century. Hanging my bag next to my desk, I pulled out my notes and textbooks. I was as isolated and out of place as ever in my new school. I'd been studying a good deal, but that was simply my way of killing the vast stretches of otherwise painfully empty time I spent here. It certainly had absolutely nothing to do with my father's praise. I hadn't sketched for a few days now. For one thing, the weather had been dull and gray, so I couldn't look up without remembering that day, and I just hadn't been in the mood in the first place. Even if I opened my sketchbook today, I'd only end up with another drawing of the sky, as if I didn't have enough of those already. Those vaguely self-mocking thoughts stopped me on the way up to the roof, redirecting my path down to the lower floor. My life was a steady line from one meaningless moment to the next. Okay. Just gave us a blank screen. Human beings are frighteningly adaptable creatures. The meals with my father had at first repulsed me to the point of vomiting were gradually growing tolerable. Sometimes I hated myself for that, but little by little I was coming to understand that it wasn't just the result of my mind acclimatizing myself to the situation.
ユミコ、学校には慣れたか？
はい。
いきなりの転校で戸惑ったかもしれんが、すぐに友達もできる。お父さんの時もだな。
Back in my day, my father was making a genuine effort. With gentle advice and anecdotes about his own experiences, he tried to reassure me. Apparently, Dad had gone through many transfers in his student years and always struggled with how to present himself to his new classmates. I was beginning to learn a number of surprisingly personal things about my father as he persistently tried to draw me into conversation.
ああ、そうか。今は時代も違うだろうからな。すまなかったな、ユミコ。
いいえ。
And he wasn't pushy or arrogant about it. He always seemed to be considering my point of view. Just as I'd heard, Dad was on an extremely tight schedule. Even when he returned home, it was extremely rare for him to stay overnight. More frequently, he would return to his company immediately after dinner. But that also meant he was coming home solely to share a meal with me. I gradually grew less prickly and slightly more communicative. By now, I could eat dinner with him without a hint of queasiness.
どうしたユミコ？
いえ、なんでも。
Just as something was about to spill out of my mouth, Mom's pale, empty face had flashed before my eyes. I don't know why it keeps doing that. There's no text that comes up. Lying in bed in my darkened room, I thought things over. I was no less certain, or uncertain, that when I first arrived at this place, or at that place, but the reasons for that inner turmoil were beginning to change. My father's attitude toward me was becoming harder to process. At first, I'd simply been disgusted by his over-familiarity. By that point, it was harder to dismiss as some bizarre game. Sometimes I could almost take this friendliness at face value. Even that remark about my hair might have been intended as nothing more than a casual compliment. Such positive interpretations were beginning to seem plausible. I tried mumbling negative words to myself, but the nagging doubts remained. My distant mother had grown kind when her condition improved. The situation was clearly different, but there was always the possibility my father had undergone a similar change in the years since I'd last seen him. Tossing and turning in my bed, I turned the questions over in my mind. I'd been so cold for so long, but little by little I could feel something like warmth returning to my body. I'll just end up being betrayed again. This time will be different. With two opposing answers battling indecisively in my mind, I waited for dawn to come. It's December. Christmas is afoot. 3 months after my return to Tokyo, my life was beginning to change even outside of the house. School didn't seem particularly unpleasant anymore. It wasn't so difficult being alone in that place once you get used to it. So long as I quietly attended my classes, the entire day would pass easily enough. I never disliked studying, so once my mood took a turn for the better, it didn't feel like wasted time. The change in the seasons had brought more periods of clear weather. I'd resumed my habit of drawing on a daily basis. And as my mind grew calm, my art slowly began to change as well. My perspective, pointed straight up for so long, began to creep downward. Every once in a while, I'd include a townscape or two among my sketches. It wasn't exactly principled of me to be finding enjoyment in that life, but there was no point sulking forever. My sardonic feelings of self-reproach slowly faded. I began to look at the world around me more calmly.
お帰りなさいませ。
ただいま。
Even those brutally awkward interactions with the household employees had gotten more tolerable with the passage of time. After a few weeks, they picked up on my non-reactions and began to tone down their aggressive approach. They would generally back off after letting me know they were available if I needed them. That arrangement was much more comfortable for me. By then, I actually was asking them for something every once in a while.
今日は部屋へすぐ戻られますか？ええ、そのようにします。かしこまりました。
Alright, bye. After asking the maid to have someone call me when it was time for dinner, I returned to my room. Sitting down in front of my desk, I thought back over the last few months. My attitudes toward that new life were beginning to soften in many ways. The one exception, I was stubbornly continuing to keep my father at arm's length. His behavior hadn't changed. He continued to treat me kindly all the while. Nonetheless, I offered him nothing but brief monosyllabic answers, vaguely avoiding his questions. That had seemed only natural at first. What else could he expect after how he treated my mother? After abandoning me for years, that resentment seemed to justify my behavior. But months had passed, and I just couldn't see any signs of the cruel man I thought he was, at least not when he was interacting with me. Nearly every night I rejected his gentle attempts to draw me into conversation. My father didn't seem to be letting that bother him, but I was beginning to feel increasingly guilty about my attitude. I threw the question up at my ceiling, knowing all too well that no answer would be forthcoming. It would be time for dinner soon. For a very different reason than before, I'd started to find that time somewhat painful.
今日も由美子の話題が出てな。榊さんのお嬢さんは可愛くて聡明でいらっしゃると目黒医大の先生もおっしゃってたよ。
はい。
由美子がこんなにいい子に育って父さんも嬉しいよ、本当に。
This man had interacted with me as something close to an ideal father for 3 straight months. That day, as always, all that came out of his mouth were words of praise and concern for me. Uneasy feelings smoldered away quietly inside my chest.
なあ、由美子。
This man is determined for something. Like he's patient. He's got something going on. My father spoke to me in a kind tone of voice. I couldn't endure his gaze. I found myself hanging my head.
由美子。
I didn't dislike being praised, not at all. He was making time in an extremely busy life for me. I wasn't yet cynical enough to dismiss that. Sometimes I felt myself on the verge of being grateful. But no, not yet. That black grime was still inside me. There was always that other emotion struggling against my guilt. So long as that remained, I would never allow myself to get any closer to my father.
母さんのことか。
I felt myself twitch with surprise. Until that point, I had deliberately steered clear of that particular topic. I'd assumed my father was intentionally avoiding it as well, so the turn of the conversation came as a real shock.
話して良いものかずっと迷っていたが、ちゃんと話さないと由美子も納得してはくれないということなんだろうな。
そんな、私は。
いいんだ。これは父さんが悪かったんだ。
My father slowly began to speak. He spoke about his feelings toward my mother, how it felt when she left, and behind everything, the constant stress his incredibly demanding job had placed on their marriage. Everything my father told me turned my image of him completely on its head.
二人が出て行った時、本当に辛かったよ。連れ戻しに行こうって何度も思った。
But you never did.
でも、仕事に追われて、それができなかった。
In time, my increasingly isolated father began to seek comfort. He admitted that the affair described in the magazine article had happened at that time.
父さんも寂しかったんだ。会社でもいろいろとあって、いけないことと知りつつも、母さんを裏切るようなことをしてしまった。
I knew it was wrong, but I still did it. I don't really get how that makes it okay. It's not okay. You fucked up. You're an asshole.
雑誌に記事が出たと聞いたとき、一番に考えたのは、母さんを巻き込んではいけないということだったんだ。
Lawyer was gonna make things way worse. That lawyer was gonna fuck things up. It was consistent. No, it wasn't. The actions that had seemed so inhumanely cruel at the time could only be explained by my father's story. After all, the lawyer never got the chance to speak with my mother. There was no proof he'd been sent to serve her with divorce papers. But even so...
Yumiko.
My father looked straight at my face from across the table. I couldn't help myself. I returned his gaze. At some point, I'd forgotten even to avert my eyes.
お父さんを許してくれないか?
It was a gentle voice. I'd begun to think I would never hear a voice like that ever again, from anyone. And yet it was coming to me from him, the person whose acceptance, in a way, I'd always wanted most. Many thoughts flooded into my head in a confused jumble. Those words were more than powerful enough. My fragile defensive wall had finally sprung a leak.
ユミコ。
ごめんなさい、お父さん。ちょっと、私。
I stood from my chair, turned away from that concerned face, and hurried out to the hallway. Halfway covering my face with my right hand, I stumbled up the stairs as best as I could. On the way up, I caught a glimpse of a servant staring at me in shock, but I wasn't composed enough to pay that any mind. The world was growing hazy before I even reached my floor, and the instant I closed the door to my room behind me, the tears came pouring down my face. One drop stained the ivory carpet beneath my feet, then another. It was hard to understand. I couldn't reconcile the man with the vicious, vulgar person the magazines described. There were so many things about him that confused me. But I couldn't believe he'd spoken those words for show. It sounded as if they'd come from the heart. Just as Mom had come to regret the cruel things she said to me, perhaps Dad was simply trying to make up for his mistakes. Looking at it from that angle, it wouldn't be so hard to accept his apology. I mean, I'm still skeptical. I don't think this is good. I had one photograph of my mother left, safe in the memory of my mobile phone. But as always, her face was turned to the side. I couldn't read her expression. My life had been shades of gray for so very long. Little by little, I could see colors beginning to emerge. It was a pleasant feeling. But this is like a half a year later. A fine spring day wait a minute, that was June. This is summer. A fine spring day just before the rainy season. The sky above was remarkably beautiful. Putting down my brush, I stretched out and muttered a few words to no one in particular. Recently, I'd been getting so absorbed in my art that it was easy to forget the time. There'd been a few incidents where I kept my car waiting long enough to cause some anxiety, so I started making a conscious effort to check my watch frequently. I examined my sketchbook instead of the sky that I'd been devoted to for so long. Today I had painted the rooftop flower bed. After months of obsessively sketching the clouds, the change had taken me by surprise. For a while I just gazed down at that image, various emotions running through me. I hurriedly gathered up my painting materials and pushed them into my bag. As it turned out, I was a little slow coming home after all. My life changed rapidly after my father's apology. The dinners together that had once been so painful were now something I looked forward to. I talked to him about many things. My art, formerly sketches of the sky in black pencil, had become increasingly colorful work executed with paintbrushes. Even my life at school was shifting ever so slightly for the better.
Sakaki-san, 今ちょっといいかしら? いいです? いいわよ.
A girl who stood out even among the young ladies in our class, Ieda Kanako, had begun to approach me on a regular basis.
ここがちょっとわからないんだけど、教えていただけるかしら? 古文の現代語訳ね。確かにここは難しいわ。ちょっと待ってて。
We'd struck up a conversation about our work in art class one day, and had been talking like this pretty frequently ever since. She wasn't quite a friend yet, but up until then I'd almost never had actual conversations in school with anyone but the teachers. By my standards, it was an enormous step forward.
ありがとう。榊さんの説明には無駄がなくていいわ。そんな、私はただ普通に話しているだけよ。そんなことないわよ。先生とか向いてるかもね。
Fuck that. I was told the same thing by like multiple people, even instructors of mine. It's tough. I don't know why it keeps on giving me that blank screen.
お父さん、お帰りなさい。
ああ、ただいま、ユミコ。
Dad was still an incredibly busy man. Nonetheless, he would always come home at least a few times every week to have dinner with me. I used to only see his face during the meal itself, but recently I'd started greeting him at the door with a natural smile on my face.
今日はね、飯田さんとずっとお話ししていて。
おお、前に言っていた友達のことだね。
まだ友達とかじゃないんだけど。
Previously, my father had talked and talked while I offered only brief responses, but the situation was largely reversed. I told Dad about everything, every trivial little thing in my life. No matter what the topic, he never failed to hear me out with a smile. That made me happy.
なあ、ユミコ。
どうしたの、お父さん。
美佐子が治ったら、3人で海外旅行にでも行くか。忙しくてそういうことをしてあげられなかったからな。それとも何か別のことがいいか？
私、遊園地がいいな。
遊園地？そんなのいつだって行けるだろう。
うん、そこがいいの。
My father looked mystified. Still, I stuck to my guns. When I was very small and very lonely, the idea of a family visit to an amusement park had enchanted me. I was well past the age to be begging for a trip like that, but that secret yearning had never really gone away.
そうか。わかった。父さんの会社の系列にも遊園地はあるからな。それこそ貸し切りで行こうか。
そんなのじゃなくていい。普通にでいいから。
ユミコはいつも控えめだな。よし。じゃあ美佐子が。母さんが治ったら3人で遊園地に行くか。
Dad spoke those words with a smile. It was the first time I'd asked him for anything. Even as my days became happier, I'd been careful not to say anything greedy, anything about the things I wanted. I suppose I couldn't quite believe that tranquil life was real. If I asked too much of the dream, I was afraid it might just fall apart underneath me.
今日は父さんとそんな話をしたと。
In that half year, the size of my diary entries had increased exponentially. Where I used to write "nothing happened" again and again, ripping off the bottom of the page for scrap paper, now I was often running out of space before I could cover everything. And in the center of my room, a canvas stood on an easel surrounded by a colorful array of art supplies, all things I'd purchased and used frequently.
もう本当に大丈夫よね。
Will something happen again? Will it fall apart in the blink of an eye? Everything was so peaceful that at times it made me feel uneasy. Come to think of it, those few days before my mother was scheduled to leave the hospital had felt very much the same.
最後出しておこうかな。
I'm quite sure I scribbled those words at the end of my diary entry. It was the one small wish I would allow myself. I have a bad feeling. I have a really bad feeling. The rainy season had come and gone, summer vacation was fast approaching. It was a day like any other. Reading on the internet that the weather would be taking a turn for the worse in the afternoon, I called off my usual rooftop painting session and went home a little early.
ここで止めてもらっていいですか？
いいんですか？まだ少し歩きますが。
今日はちょっと歩きたい気分なので。
They said it would be raining in the evening, but for the moment it was a clear and pleasant summer afternoon. Therefore, I got out of the car halfway and walked the remaining kilometer or so home. There wasn't any real reason for that. It was just a whim. I don't like this music. When I opened the front door and slipped inside, I found the entrance hall empty of the servants who were usually there to greet me. It was probably because I'd returned so suddenly. Even when I closed the door behind me, the hallway remained silent. Not that it really bothered me either way. I began to move toward the stairs. Huh? But a voice from deeper in the hallway stopped me in my tracks. If that woman hadn't happened to speak my name at that very moment, without a doubt I would have shrugged, gone up the stairs to my room, and stayed completely oblivious. I slowly inched my way down the passage, careful not to make a sound, and stopped just before a corner. From the other side, I could hear the 3 employees who usually met me at the door talking about something. Ah, fuck, my bad. They were speaking quietly, but I could make out their conversation clearly enough. I shouldn't be listening to this. My throbbing heart was making that very clear. But my feet wouldn't budge, and my ears were intent on capturing every word of their discussion. Ah, so her brother, half-brother kinda, passed away. Now it all makes sense. My body had begun to tremble. It was part of the story I'd almost pushed out of my mind by now. That mistress, and the boy she'd supposedly given birth to. I'd always thought it was strange. Why had Dad called for me when he did? Why suddenly approach a daughter you tossed aside once before? I thought that attention was his way of atoning for my mother's suffering. God damn, what an evil man. I thought that was his attempt at finally becoming a father to me. No, I simply convinced myself it had been that way, or it had to be that way. Deep down, I knew all along that it couldn't possibly have been true. With that languid response, the group dispersed. Even long after the footsteps faded away, I stood there in silence, perfectly still. An idle question occurred to me. What sort of an expression do I have on my face right now? What sort of expression do people make at times like these? I felt oddly detached from reality, as though watching a movie projected before my eyes by some hidden camera. Eventually, I took one step, then another. I dragged myself up the stairs on legs that didn't feel like my own. They said it would be raining in the evening, but it was a clear and pleasant summer afternoon. Therefore, I got out of the car halfway and walked the remaining kilometer or so home. There wasn't any real reason for that. There wasn't any real reason at all. And so, I could only curse God. I reached my room. It was far too quiet inside. I'd almost begun to forget how painful the absence of sound could be. I'd almost begun to find the silence comfortable.
よし。じゃあ、美佐子が母さんが治ったら3人で遊園地に行くか。
なんでそんなことを平然と言えるの？
Scraps of notebook paper danced around me. Fragments of the word dad, fragments of the word happy, fragments of sentences highlighted in bright colors. A half-year preserved in joyful words scattered through the air. The upper half of my painting was thick with dabs of blue and yellow paint. That was the first part to go. With a harsh rip, the cloth tore away from one of the screws holding it in place, and as the canvas curled in on itself, white paint fell to the ground like a dusting of snow. In the lightness room, white, blue, and yellow flew about. Shattered and torn, powerless and broken, they melted one by one into the darkness. Yikes. Unable to think, unable to act, I endured the night. The time came for me to wake up, acting on pure reflexive habit. I stood up on unsteady feet and made my preparations. Pathetically enough, there was still a part of me holding on to hope. The house was no longer a refuge, but I'd begun to make a small place for myself at school. I could just make more friends, find people to talk to. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe that would be something. I caught a glimpse of the face I was looking for from the hallway. Ida-san might be willing. If I kept talking to her, little by little, she might become my friend. Ida-san seemed to be talking to someone. I peered in through the window. She was sitting at the very center of a group of girls. I'd just have to talk to her later, when she was alone.
Sakaki-san って目かけの子なんだって。お父様が。
The child of a mistress. Filthy words, the sort of words that almost never left that girl's mouth. The same hateful words that they'd printed in the magazine that changed everything.
まだちょっとあの子に優しくしておこうかと思うの。え？どうしてそんなことするの？そんな子だったらなおさら無視しておけば。だってそうしたらもっと興味深い話が聞けるかもしれないじゃない。どうやって榊の家に母親が取り入ったのかとか。それでね。
For some reason, I thought of fruit hanging from a tree. At first, it ripens and swells on the end of its branch, beautiful and tempting. But in the end, its coloration grows impure and unattractive. Its point of connection to the tree begins to creak from the strain. One thread of fiber snaps, and then another. The thin line holding it to life and nourishment grows thinner and thinner. Okay. I entered the classroom. The girls who had been snickering about me until a moment before innocently looking away and moved on to another topic of conversation. A few moments after dropping my bag by my desk, I slowly began to walk in their direction. I felt every movement of my feet with a brilliant, eerie clarity. This might be what it's like to take the last few steps toward the summit of a high mountain. A climber has the thrill of achieving something, but the determination, the clear-minded acceptance of fate, there might be something similar. Or so I thought, a spectator to my own actions.
あら、榊さん、何のご用かしら?
Iida Kaneko turned to face me with her usual placid smile. I had already decided what would happen next. Familiar feelings swelled inside me, the same as when I'd cut my hair, my diary, my canvas.
どうしたの、榊さん。お顔の色がよろしくないわ。先生に。
Iida Kaneko's hand reached out to me. To my eyes, it looked like the grasping claw of a corpse pulling me down into hell. I'd understood all along. I'd simply kept myself from noticing. There was never any place of refuge here. I'd forced myself to believe in lies because I couldn't keep going without them. But I'd finally found another way to live. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. That ain't good. That's very bad. I watched serenely as the blood spurted out. For a moment, I couldn't even process what had happened. For just a moment, she stared blankly at her hand. At her palm dyed in red. Yeah, me too. Ida Kaneko collapsed in slow motion. Desks clattered, all around. The others backed away as if distancing themselves from a live bomb.
Sakaki-san! あなた、一体何してるの？先生、誰か呼んできて！先生を！
That's right. I should have cut it all apart. I should have just shut off my brain and cut my way to freedom. I was grinding my teeth as hard as I could. There were tears streaming down my face. But all things considered, I didn't feel particularly sad. Much the opposite. Since the blade had finally severed me from lies, I was filled with a strange sense of relief. It felt as though a wide, shining road forward had been revealed to me. I shouldn't have hoped for a happy ending in the first place. Everything was scripted from the very start, and the actress had passively accepted her roles, dreaming of a heartwarming conclusion to the black comedy that had been written for her. Yeah, I don't know about this. At some point, I'd begun to laugh. The tears were still rolling down my cheeks, but there was no sadness in me anymore. I had left most of that behind on the day my mother broke, and the rest on the day my father betrayed me. I depleted my stock of sorrow. I didn't really expect the whole craziness part to be here. Or anywhere. Just how much of a clown do I need to be? Just how pathetic do I need to become? What do I need to do to satisfy my cowering audience? To please the god who wrote this play? Their eyes watched me from what felt like an enormous distance, pushing me lower and lower into the dirt. I brandished the open box cutter in my right hand toward the back of the classroom. Incoherent little shrieks from my classmates were the only response. A few girls had already broken down in tears. I laughed in their place, even when the teachers who came running pinned me down, even when they carried me out of the classroom like some sort of terrorist. Wouldn't it be odder not to laugh at something so utterly ridiculous? When they took me away, I noticed my desk standing isolated in the chaos, and felt a twinge of pity at leaving it behind. Until the very end, I could never see the person who supposedly sat there. My father acted swiftly once he was notified. A settlement was reached with the Ida family. The incident was erased without so much as a disciplinary hearing. At first, my father tried to coax me out of my locked room with the gentle words, but I refused to acknowledge his existence. After 2 months of that siege, I was half forced out, loaded unceremoniously into a car, and brought to a town where the air smelled of salt water. And here we are! I understood what sort of a place it was the moment I saw the high walls surrounding it. It was a housing facility, a pleasant little cage where I could be safely stowed away without the risk of causing further trouble. A woman who introduced herself as the principal introduced me to the school with a slightly fearful expression on her face. She brought me to an empty dormitory and told me it would be my new home. When I checked the bank book I'd been handed on the way over, I found a rather excessive amount of pocket money in my account. From the day I began to wear an exceptionally flashy school uniform and commute to Mihama Academy, I hadn't been face to face with my father even once. Are we finally done? I think we are. I think we're done. Fuck, yes, dude! Finally, I've been tired of that. Like, okay, it was a good backstory, I do have to say, but it really dragged on because it seemed like it was repeating itself with the whole things were going great, but things went bad, and then things went good somehow, and we're almost perfect again. But nope, time to almost murder someone. Holy shit. A personality starts off as something like a cube. When we're young, we clumsily bump our corners against other people in the form of childish conflicts. Eventually, our sharp edges are worn away to leave something more like a sphere. It's more or less what people are describing when they say someone softened. Moderate collisions with others help us mature, but when those first impacts are too strong, they can have a different effect. Instead of losing our corners little by little, we splinter in strange, harsh ways, warping into crooked shapes. Once crooked, it's hard to become a sphere. Even as the people around them mellow, their sharpness only grows harsher, and everyone who approaches ends up getting hurt. But even the most warped human beings started the same as everyone else. Sometimes they look back on the past and grieve. Sometimes they wonder if it's not too late to reshape themselves. And because they know that it's an empty dream, they grieve once again. Sakaki Yumiko is one of many such sad, distorted objects. The rain, which I'd taken for a passing shower, continued long after the thunder passed away. By the time we leave our cover in the lingering drizzle, the sun's already set. In a change from the usual routine, I hurry down the road home with an arm wrapped around Sakaki, who stumbles along unsteadily at my side. Unfortunately, the rain's very weak by now, but the constant dampness has left her body noticeably chilled. And at the moment, her emotional state is a bit of a concern as well. I lean closely over to Sakaki as we walk, sheltering her from the rain as best as I can. That relatively brief journey back to the dorm feels awfully long right now.
あ、帰ってきた。どうしたの？ずいぶん遅かったじゃん。榊さんどうしたの？何か怪我とかしたとか？
Amane yelps in surprise the instant she lays eyes on us. Was it that much of a shock to see me holding Sakaki by the shoulder? Well, considering the girl's normal personality, I suppose it's only reasonable to jump straight to assuming something's physically wrong with her. We got caught up in that downpour, that's all. We sheltered from the rain for a while.
それで雨に濡れちゃったのね。榊さん大丈夫？ごめんなさい。心配をかけたわね。
Her physical condition aside, Sakaki seems badly drained in spirit. That uncharacteristic weakness from before is still plainly evident in her tone of voice.
体冷えたでしょ？何か温かいものでも飲む？用意するけど。ありがとう。それじゃあ、お言葉に甘えていただくわ。了解。ユージは榊さんを部屋まで連れて行って、後で持っていくから。
Appreciate it.
いいわよ、これぐらい。それよりほら、早く。
I'm making a note. Once I'm old and gray, I'm going to write Amane was like a mother to us all in my memoirs.
お礼のつもりだったら、吹き込むような表記はマジ勘弁して。
As soon as I got Sakaki to her room, she collapsed into her bed. Normally, she would have ejected me to change out of her wet clothes, but she's currently lacking the energy and willpower to bother.
よほど疲れてたのね。もう寝ちゃったわよ、榊さん。
Yeah. The hot orange and honey drink Amane provided seemed to calm Sakaki down. It didn't take long at all for her to nod off. I think she's got a slight fever as well. We were out in the rain and all.
みたいね。ちょっと暑いかな。
Lightly holding her hand to Sakaki's forehead, Amane nods in agreement. Sakaki doesn't seem to be in any real discomfort, but I can tell that she's breathing a little roughly. In any case, thanks for the help, Amane. I'm going to keep an eye on her for a little longer, but you can head back to your room. Amane's response seems oddly hesitant. What's wrong?
ねえ、ユージ。
Yes.
あのさ、分かってるとは思うけど、やっちゃダメだからね。
The hell?
だからさ、二人っきりじゃん？看病してるわけじゃない？そしたらなんかこう、ついでにしちゃったら大変だし、その、風邪うつっちゃったら大変かなって。
Who the fuck says maybe you just seize the moment and dip your wick? My face falls into my palm. For some reason, I find myself recalling a gag brain graph website Sachi showed me once. Just by entering someone's name, you get a brain-shaped pie chart breaking down the composition of their thoughts. I didn't think to try Amane at the time, but I think hers would be divided in half right down the middle. One side would be folksy grandma wisdom. The other should probably go without saying, would be branded with the word dicks. You think I'm going to start making babies like a rabbit the moment someone leaves me in a cage with a female? Tell me, woman, does this scenario play out frequently inside that filthy mind of yours?
だから大事に至らないように釘刺しておこうっていうことよ。わかるでしょ、そういうの。
It's still not entirely clear to me what Amane is so worried about, but I find it extremely unpleasant to have such aspirations cast on my character. Not a bad idea, come to think of it.
何がよ。
Just remembered something I read in a book discussing novel varieties of sexual intercourse. It seems a slight fever actually increases the natural heat of the genitalia, sometimes leading to greater pleasure for both partners. Alright then, might as well put that to the test. It's not like you can catch a fever intentionally, and I'll admit to being highly curious as a man. I'm sure Sakaki will understand. A little experimentation like this can only enrich your life, right? She might end up thanking me for expanding her horizons. The thought hadn't even occurred to me, but thanks to a tip from my sexually savvy friend Amane, a new world of possibility awaits. Life is always overflowing with chances to explore the wonders of the unknown. I'm deeply impressed by your ability to keep that in mind even at a time like this. Thank you, Amane. Amane? Amane stares back at me with the blank eyes of a broken electronic toy. Smiling brightly, I give her a friendly thump on the shoulder. It was a joke. Amane's karate chop lands a critical hit smack in the middle of my weary head. From outside, an owl hoots in mournful commissar... whatever the fuck. I'm tired. I said I understand, didn't I? Come on, get lost already. Amane backs slowly out of the room, staring at me reproachfully. Reproachfully, excuse me. I was only teasing her a little in retaliation for slandering me, but it seems I've ended up deepening her unfounded suspicions. Probably best to consider the possibility she might try some half-assed wiretapping outside the door. Shaking my head, I return to Sakaki's side. Her breath's coming regularly, a little more quietly than before. She doesn't seem to have noticed the commotion in the slightest. Well, that's definitely for the best. Borrowing the chair from Sakaki's desk, I ease myself down and look her over at closer range. Come to think of it, this is the first time I've seen her sleeping. The girl really does have a pretty face. She's constantly forcing it into a scowl, so it's easy not to notice at times, but Sakaki Yumiko is definitely what you'd call a beauty. Right now, that face is relaxed. Her eyes shut, her cheeks slightly flushed. Sakaki looks very calm and peaceful at the moment, but much of her life has been an emotional roller coaster of loneliness, hope, and anger. Now that I know the whole story, her usual prickly attitude is all too understandable. Rest easy, alright? I'll protect you. I lightly reach down to put my hand over on her forehead, excuse me, I'm making mistakes now, currently covered in a damp towel. The moisture against my palm is slightly warm from the heat of her fever. And I guess it's the next day. Alright, this is where we're going to end it. Almost got an hour this time, but I don't want to, cut it off in the middle of context, so we'll call it here. My head hurts. I've been really tired from having to move. That's actually my current situation. I don't record this enough, but right now I'm in the middle of moving. I'm glad I've been able to actually get at least one of these episodes in before I leave this place. I am back at my original house, and I'm moving with my parents to a new house. This is the place I started recording the Fruit of Grisaia in about 3 years ago. So it kind of sucks that I won't be back here to finish the game off. But boy oh boy, I definitely will savor the time. So I sat here and just recorded hours upon hours of all of the Grisaia games. I don't know, I'm getting a little bit too sentimental, but it is true. I did start recording the Fruit of Grisaia in this very spot, or maybe a few feet to my right, but kind of sucks I won't be able to finish it here. But I'm looking forward to the new place and whatnot. I think it'll be great, and hopefully we'll be able to get through all this. The Intruders! The next episode's gonna be something. So make sure you tune in for that one as we get another 50 subscribers for that next episode. So thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And I guess the next time I record this, I'll be in a new place, and we'll power through the rest of this. Hopefully, I really have no idea how much more we have to go, but we got the backstory taken care of. So now we gotta see how the story here plays out. So I guess I'll see you all next time. Thank you for subscribing and watching, of course. And yeah, I'll see you guys then. Take it easy.